At the surprise party for my 40th birthday, the room smelled like apple pie and cedar smoke. Someone had lit the old fireplace, even though the evening was warm, and the crackle mixed with laughter that didn't sound forced, for once. Balloons brushed against the ceiling, Emily's laughter cut through the music, and my mother clapped off beat to a song she didn't know. For a little while, Hendersonville felt kind again. I hadn't seen my parents smile at me that way in years, not since the arguments about the company, not since Richard, my older brother, took over most of the board meetings at Bennett Timber and Supply. Tonight, though, they looked at me like a son again, not a burden. I remember thinking, maybe things are healing. When the lights dimmed for the cake, my daughter held the candles with both hands, whispering something before blowing them out beside me. I could tell she'd made a wish for us, not for herself. She's only 12, but she sees more than she should. After the last guest left and the echoes of goodbyes faded down the gravel driveway, the house changed. The music stopped. The laughter didn't. It just froze somewhere in the walls, like it was waiting to see what would happen next. My father asked me to come into his office. His voice was calm, too calm. I followed him down the hallway lined with framed photos of the family business, black and white pictures of my grandfather beside stacks of lumber, the first Bennett truck, Richard shaking hands with city officials. I was in only one photo, and it was crooked. On the desk sat a small box wrapped in gold paper, the kind my mother saves from Christmases past. "Your mother wanted you to have this," my father said. He didn't sit. Neither did I. I opened the box carefully, expecting maybe an old watch or one of Granddad's cufflinks. But inside was a white envelope, heavy, official, the kind lawyers use. My name was typed on the front, Adam Bennett. When I slid the letter out, I recognized the logo at the top immediately, Dunley and Harris, Family Law. My father's signature rested at the bottom of the page, my mother's beside it. It took me only a moment to understand. The letter stated that, effective immediately, I was to be removed from all family trust holdings, including any claims to Bennett Timber and Supply Co. and any real estate or financial assets tied to the Bennett estate. It also extended to my wife, Claire, and to our daughter, Emily. A polite sentence at the end read, "This decision has been made in the best interest of preserving the Bennett legacy." I could feel my pulse in my fingertips, but my voice never rose. I folded the letter once, then again, and placed it back in the envelope. When I looked up, my father's expression hadn't changed. If anything, it softened, as if he expected me to thank him. "Dad, you really think this protects the legacy?" He adjusted his glasses. "It's better this way, Adam. You were never meant to lead this family." For a second, the sound of the clock behind him filled the room. Then nothing. I thought about the decades of work, the years in that mill breathing sawdust and hope, the times I defended my brother's mistakes because I didn't want to embarrass the family name. I thought of Emily, asleep at home, dreaming of a family she believed was whole. I wanted to shout. Instead, I took the box, placed it back on his desk, and nodded once. Outside, the night had turned colder. The stars above Hendersonville looked sharp enough to cut through glass. I walked to my truck without saying goodbye. As I turned the key, I caught my reflection in the window. Calm. Almost unfamiliar. That was the moment I understood something my father never would. You can take a man's inheritance, but when you do, you teach him what truly belongs to him. And I had just learned that lesson. The road from my parents' house to mine winds through the edge of Hendersonville, past orchards and quiet homes that always smell faintly of rain and applewood. I don't remember the drive that night. I just remember the sound. Not of the engine, but of the paper in my pocket. It seemed alive, like it was breathing. When I got home, Claire was still awake. The kitchen light was on, warm and soft, the way she keeps it when she's waiting for me. She smiled at first, that tired, familiar smile that says, "I'm glad you're safe." Then she saw my face. The smile didn't fade. It just stopped trying. "Everything okay?" she asked. I set the envelope on the counter. "That depends on what you call okay." She didn't touch it, just stared, as if the paper itself carried a smell she recognized. "They gave it to you, didn't they?" she whispered. That sentence told me everything I needed to know. She'd known something was coming. "I didn't think they'd actually go through with it," she said quickly. "Richard told me there were meetings, but I thought it was about the business, not disowning us." I finished for her. Her eyes filled with tears, but she didn't cry. Claire's strong that way. She saves her breakdowns for when no one's watching, even me. I took the envelope and slid it back into my jacket. "Emily asleep?" She nodded. "She wanted to wait for you, but she fell asleep on the couch." I went to the living room. My daughter was curled up under a quilt, one arm wrapped around that stuffed bear she's had since she was 3. Her hair had fallen across her face, and for a moment I saw Claire in her, the same gentle stubbornness. I sat down quietly beside her, trying not to wake her, but she stirred anyway. "Dad?" "Yes, sweetheart. I'm here." She blinked sleepily, her voice small. "Why doesn't Grandpa like us anymore?" 12 years old, and she'd already felt the shift in the air. The silence between visits, the phone calls that stopped, the way her grandfather looked at her like she belonged to someone else. I brushed a strand of hair from her forehead. "Sometimes people forget what matters," I said. "But that's not your fault." She smiled, half asleep. "Can we go to the orchard tomorrow?" "Sure," I said. "We'll go." When she drifted back into dreams, I sat there watching her breathe, wondering how I was supposed to explain that her family name, the one carved into every truck, every plank of the mill, didn't mean home anymore. Later, in bed, Claire tried to speak again. "Adam, your brother called me last week. He said your father was worried about you, about the way you've been running things." "I haven't been running things in over a year," I said. She looked down. "I thought it was just a family meeting, Adam. I didn't know they'd go that far." The clock ticked between us. Each sound felt like a sentence ending. I turned to face her. "You should have told me." "I was trying to protect you." The words stung because they were honest. I got up, walked to the window, and looked out at the dark stretch of the mountains, blue even at night. The same ridgeline my grandfather used to point at when he said, "That's where hard work ends and faith begins." I didn't say another word that night. I stood there until the first trace of dawn appeared over the peaks, and the birds started singing like they didn't know the world had changed. In that quiet, I realized something. Noise is easy. Silence takes strength. And for the first time in my life, I finally understood the power of both. The morning after, the silence felt heavier than the night itself. The sun came through the curtains in thin lines, touching the kitchen table where the envelope still lay. I hadn't moved it. I wanted to see it there, a reminder, not a wound. Claire tried to make coffee, but the machine hissed and sputtered before giving up. The smell of burnt grounds filled the air. She apologized, and I told her not to. Some days start wrong because they're supposed to. I drove into town before anyone woke up. Hendersonville was quiet, stores still closed, sidewalks slick from the night rain. I passed the old courthouse, the church, the lumber trucks that carried the Bennett logo. My name, still printed in bold letters, staring back at me from every passing trailer. Bennett Timberman Supply Co. sat at the end of Willow Road, surrounded by stacks of fresh-cut boards and the steady hum of saws. I parked near the side entrance where I used to clock in every morning. The smell of cedar hit me, familiar, grounding. Inside, the men who'd worked with me for years lowered their voices when I walked by. Pity, confusion, maybe fear.
It was all there, hidden behind polite nods. I headed straight to the back office, where the company accountant, Tom Jenkins, kept his desk. Tom looked up when I stepped in. His tie was crooked and there were sweat marks under his collar. "Adam," he said quietly, "you shouldn't be here." "I know. That's why I came early." He hesitated, glanced at the door, then motioned for me to sit. "Richard told everyone the transition was official. Said you were stepping away for personal reasons." "Personal?" I said, almost laughing. "That's one way to say disowned." Tom winced. "Look, I don't want to get involved, but you should know there've been changes. Paperwork going missing, transfers that don't line up." He slid a file halfway across the desk, then stopped himself. "If I show you this, I could lose my job." I leaned forward. "Then don't show me. Just tell me if my brother's been moving money out of the company." Tom's eyes shifted. "He's restructuring things, setting up a new entity, Bennett Holdings. Your parents signed off last week." I felt the ground tilt beneath me. "And me?" He lowered his voice. "You're not listed anywhere, not even as a beneficiary." For a moment, I couldn't breathe. The saws outside screamed sharp and high, like the sound of something being split open. "Why are you telling me this, Tom?" He looked down at his hands. "Because your grandfather built this place for both of you. He'd roll in his grave if he saw what's happening. And because, well, you were always fair with us. The others noticed that." He reached into his drawer, pulled out a small envelope, old, folded at the corners, and pushed it toward me. "You didn't get this from me," he whispered. Inside was a photocopy of the signature page from the new trust agreement. My father's handwriting, my mother's too. Richard's name circled at the top as sole managing partner. I stared at it until the letters blurred. Tom's voice trembled. "Adam, they already signed the papers." I thanked him, pocketed the envelope, and walked out without another word. The air outside smelled like rain and sawdust, the scent of my childhood, now tainted. Driving back through Main Street, I caught my reflection in a shop window. I looked calm, but something had changed behind my eyes. Something colder, steadier. That night I sat on the porch until the crickets replaced the noise in my head. Claire came out, a blanket over her shoulders. She didn't ask what I'd found. She just sat beside me, close enough to hear me breathe. Under the porch light, I pulled the envelope from my pocket and unfolded the paper one more time. They had taken everything they could touch. They hadn't yet realized what they couldn't. And that realization, quiet, sharp, and final, was the beginning of everything that would follow. 2 days passed before I touched that letter again. I kept it folded in the inside pocket of my jacket, right over my heart, as if the weight of it could keep me from forgetting. But I didn't need paper to remind me what betrayal felt like. It had a pulse of its own. Claire tried to convince me to talk to them. "Maybe there's a misunderstanding," she said. "There's not," I told her. "How can you be sure?" "Because it's written down." She stopped insisting after that. Some wounds don't need to bleed to be real. By Thursday, the whispers in town had started. Hendersonville is small. Stories travel faster than cars. The cashier at the diner hesitated when she saw me. The pastor's wife looked away at the grocery store. Everyone knew something, just not the truth. That afternoon, I drove up to the edge of town where the hills start to climb. Mr. Dunley's house sat there, behind an old oak fence and a mailbox that hadn't been straight in years. He'd been our family lawyer for decades before retiring. When I was a boy, he used to sneak me candy while my father discussed contracts in the next room. He answered the door slowly, wearing a sweater that looked older than both of us. "Adam Bennett," he said, smiling faintly. "You look more like your grandfather every time I see you." "I don't feel like him." "Come in, son." The house smelled of pine polish and thyme. Bookshelves lined every wall, filled with thick volumes and memories. He motioned me to sit by the fireplace. "What brings you here?" I pulled the letter from my jacket and handed it to him. He adjusted his glasses and read in silence. The fire popped once, the only sound in the room. When he finished, he folded the letter carefully, the way a man handles something sacred. "So they finally did it," he murmured. "You knew this was coming?" I sighed. "Your father hinted at changes months ago. Said Richard was taking on more responsibility. I warned him not to make decisions out of pride, but..." He shook his head. "Some men mistake control for love. I need to know if there's anything left, anything they can't touch." Dunley leaned back, thinking. "Your grandfather was smarter than he looked. When he built the company, he set up 2 trusts, one for business operations, one for family property. The second one was never merged." I frowned. "I've never seen that document." "That's because it was filed separately, under your name." He rose slowly and walked to a filing cabinet, rifling through folders marked in his careful handwriting. After a minute, he pulled out a thin stack of papers tied with a faded ribbon. "This," he said, handing it to me, "is the original deed to the old orchard property. It's held in a life estate. According to this clause, you retain occupancy and full control unless you willingly relinquish it. Which means they can't take it." He nodded. "Not without your consent." I looked at the document. The ink faded, but still legible. The orchard hadn't produced much in years, but it was part of our story. The land where my grandfather planted his first trees, where my mother used to pick apples every fall. "You hold on to that, Adam," Dunley said. "It's not much, but it's something." I slipped the paper into my jacket, feeling its edges against the old letter. One wound, one weapon. He studied me for a long moment. "Adam, are you planning to fight this?" I looked toward the window. The sky was starting to turn the color of steel, heavy and still. I said, "Not with words." On my way out, he called after me. "Your grandfather once told me the Bennett name would survive because of the quiet ones. Don't forget that." Driving home, I passed the orchard, rows of bare trees standing against the fading light. For the first time in weeks, I stopped the truck and stepped out. The wind carried the faint smell of old apples and soil. I knelt, pressed my hand into the dirt, and made a promise that no one would hear. They thought they'd taken everything, but all they'd done was remind me what I still owned: my silence, my word, and the land beneath my feet. By Friday morning, the letter from my father and the document from Mr. Dunley were folded together inside the same envelope. One tried to erase me. The other refused to let me disappear. I kept both close, like opposite truths waiting to collide. Claire noticed the change in me. She didn't ask questions, just watched the way I moved around the house, quieter, more deliberate. When I kissed her on the cheek before leaving that morning, she held on a second longer than usual. She always could feel when I'd made up my mind about something. Downtown Hendersonville still looked the same: clean storefronts, the old diner, the post office that never changed its hours. But once people know your story, the whole town seems to tilt. The barista at the cafe gave me my coffee without meeting my eyes. I didn't blame them. Folks here respect power, and power usually comes with a last name. The Bennetts had both, until now. I parked outside First Carolina Bank, where I used to meet clients back when my father still trusted me to sign checks for the company. Inside, the air smelled of paper and lemon polish. A young teller greeted me politely, but her smile froze when I asked for Mark Evers, the senior loan officer who'd known our family since before I was born. Mark came out from his office, a little heavier than I remembered, his tie slightly loosened. "Adam," he said, surprised but friendly. "Didn't expect to see you." "Just need to ask a favor," I said, "off the record." He looked at me carefully, then waved me in. The office was small but private. Framed photos of golf tournaments and charity events lined the walls, all sponsored by Bennett Timber and Supply. I wondered if they'd still hang there a month from now. I told him I needed to see recent movement from the company accounts, not the statements my brother approved, the originals. He leaned back. "Adam, you know I can't just—" "I know," I said. "You also know my grandfather built this company on loans from this bank. You know what kind of man he was. I just need to understand what's happening before someone ruins what he left." Mark sighed, rubbed his chin, and finally nodded. "Give me an hour." I waited in my truck across the street, watching people pass by with their small-town calm. An elderly couple walked their dog. A kid rode by on a bike with one training wheel missing. Ordinary life went on while mine quietly unraveled. When Mark returned, he slipped into the passenger seat without a word, holding a folder. "You didn't get this from me," he said. Inside were transaction logs, pages of transfers from the company account into one labeled R. Bennett Holdings, LLC. Dates, amounts, signatures. Richard's signatures. I flipped through each line, my chest tightening. He wasn't just consolidating power, he was stripping assets, setting up something new, without oversight. Mark looked uneasy. "You'll want to be careful. If this gets out the wrong way." "It won't," I said. That afternoon, I drove to the office of Lydia Crane, a public attorney who handled estate audits for the county. We'd gone to high school together. She was the kind of woman who never let fear bend her sense of right. I handed her the folder and a sealed envelope. I told her, "Hold this for me. If anyone ever asks why, just say it's insurance." She studied me for a long moment. "Adam, what are you doing?" "Making sure my daughter has something honest left to inherit." I signed a short declaration and left everything in her hands, documented, dated, protected. That night after dinner, the phone rang. Claire was tucking Emily in when I answered. "Adam," a voice snapped through the line. "Richard, you've been asking questions, haven't you?" I said nothing. "Don't play dumb. I talked to the bank. You think you can undermine me?" I let the silence stretch. "No, Richard," I said finally. "Just listening." He laughed once, sharp, humorless. "You never learn, do you?" Then the line went dead. I hung up the phone and stood there for a long moment, feeling the weight of quiet victory. He'd taken the bait. The truth was safe, sealed away where no Bennett could touch it. And somewhere deep down, I knew this was only the second thing I'd have to do.
The next morning, a cold rain fell over Hendersonville, soft enough to blur the ridge lines of the Blue Ridge Mountains. It felt like the town itself was exhaling, quiet, gray, and heavy. I'd already done 2 things I couldn't undo, and there was one more left. Claire watched me pack a folder into my coat. "Where are you going?" she asked. "To see Mom," I said. Her eyes softened. "She's not the one who—" "I know." I paused, pulling the collar higher around my neck. "That's why I need to see her." The hospital sat on the hill overlooking Main Street, a red brick building that always smelled faintly of rain and bleach. The nurses recognized my last name and spoke with the polite caution that comes with small-town gossip. I thanked them anyway.
When I entered my mother's room, she was awake, a blanket drawn up to her chest, the TV playing some old black and white movie with the sound turned down. Her hair had gone nearly white, and her hands trembled when she reached for the water glass. "Adam," she said quietly, "I wondered when you'd come." "I should have been here sooner." She shook her head. "Your father's been stubborn. You know how he gets when Richard starts talking numbers." "That's not all he's been talking," I said. Her eyes flickered. "I told him it was wrong. Cutting you out, it isn't what your grandfather wanted." I sat beside her, the chair creaking under my weight. "I didn't come to talk about the letter. I just need you to have something." I handed her a small envelope, plain, unmarked, sealed. She hesitated. "What is it?" "A letter. For you. You can read it when you're ready." She ran her fingers over it, like she could feel the words through the paper. "And what did you write?" "Just the truth, and what I did." Her brow furrowed. "Adam, what did you do?" "I protected Emily and what's hers." The confusion in her face deepened. I reached into my coat and placed a copy of the old orchard deed on the table beside her. "That land is part of her future now. I filed the documents yesterday. The trust your father signed never covered it. It belongs to me, and after me, to her." She looked down at the page, then back at me. Her eyes glistened. "He doesn't know, does he?" "Not yet." The rain outside grew louder, tapping the window in uneven rhythms. "You've always been like your grandfather, quiet until it matters. He used to say silence can be a sword if you learn when to draw it." I smiled faintly. Maybe I finally did. She reached for my hand, her grip weak but warm. "Promise me you'll keep that orchard alive for her." "I already started. The soil's good. It just needed care." We sat there for a long time, saying nothing. The nurse came in once, adjusted a drip, and left us alone again. Before leaving, I kissed my mother's forehead. "Tell Dad—" I hesitated. "Tell him I'm not angry. Just done." As I stepped into the hallway, the fluorescent lights hummed above me. The world outside was still gray, but the air felt lighter. I drove past the orchard on my way home. The rain had stopped, and mist rose between the rows of bare trees like smoke. I got out of the truck and walked through the mud, the earth soft under my boots. For the first time, I didn't see loss. I saw roots. They'd tried to cut me off from everything that bore my name, but what they didn't understand was simple. Legacy isn't written on paper, it's planted, and I just made sure mine would keep growing.
2 weeks passed. Hendersonville kept its rhythm. Church bells on Sunday, market on Wednesday, gossip every day in between. I stopped noticing the looks people gave me. Folks like to whisper until the wind changes, then they whisper about something else. One morning, I was fixing the latch on the barn door when my phone buzzed. Unknown number. I almost let it ring out, but something made me answer. "Mr. Bennett," a voice said, "this is Sandra Lopez, Compliance Division at First Carolina Bank. We'd like to ask a few questions about your brother's financial activity." I tightened the screwdriver until the wood creaked. "My brother's?" "Yes, sir. Routine audit," she said. "Your name came up on legacy documents. You're not under review, but you might want to know he is." After we hung up, the air felt lighter. I didn't smile. I just stood there, listening to the quiet hum of saws from the valley, the same sound that had built our name. By the weekend, the whole town knew. Richard Bennett, the Golden Sun, was being investigated for fraudulent transfers. The rumor spread through Main Street like pollen in spring, soft, invisible, but everywhere. I went about my days as usual, fixed fences, worked the orchard, picked up Emily from school. She liked telling me which trees she thought would bloom first, and I let her believe she was right about every one. At night, when the wind shifted, I could hear distant trucks from the mill and wondered what Richard was doing, whether he was pacing the same floor our father once did, wondering where control had gone. The knock came 3 days later. It was late afternoon. The light was gold and fading. A black sedan rolled up the dirt road, dust curling behind it. My stomach knew before my mind did. My father stepped out, coat buttoned, expression tight. He hadn't been to my house in months. "Dad," I said, meeting him halfway down the drive. "Adam." He nodded. For a moment, neither of us spoke. He glanced toward the orchard, where Emily was helping Claire hang wind chimes. The sound carried faintly in the breeze. He cleared his throat. "Your brother's in trouble." I heard. "The bank froze part of the accounts. There's talk of charges. He says you knew." I did. My father's jaw tightened. "Then maybe you can help us. Keep the family from falling apart any further." I studied him, the lines deeper than I remembered, pride bruised but not broken. "Help you?" I said quietly. "After you cut me out?" He looked away, toward the mountains. "We made mistakes." "We?" He took a slow breath. "Richard's still my son." "And I'm not?" His silence was answer enough. For a long moment, all I heard were those wind chimes, gentle, steady, unbothered by the storm between us. Finally, I spoke. "You taught me that the Bennett name stood for work and honor, that we fix what we break. I believed that, still do. So if you're asking whether I'll let the company burn, no. But I won't save it for the money. I'll save it because my daughter deserves to know her family wasn't built on lies." He nodded once, eyes wet but hard. "Can you do it?" "Yes," I said, "but you won't like how." He didn't answer, just turned, walked back to his car, and drove away. When the dust settled, Emily ran up to me, barefoot and smiling. "Grandpa was here?" "Yeah," I said. "He came to ask for help." She tilted her head. "Are you going to help him?" I looked at the orchard, rows of young trees glowing under the setting sun. "We're already helping." That night, I opened the folder from Lydia Crane and reviewed every document I'd sealed away. Proof of fraud, proof of the trust, proof of who we really were. Tomorrow, I'd make the final call, the one that would decide what kind of legacy the Bennetts left behind.
I made the call on a Monday morning, just after sunrise. The sky over Hendersonville was streaked with silver and pink, the kind of light that makes everything look forgiven. Lydia Crane answered on the second ring. "It's time," I said. "I figured it was," she replied. "Do you want to be in the room when it happens?" "No," I said. "Just make sure it's done right." By noon, the documents were released to the investigators, clean, detailed, undeniable. Every transfer Richard had hidden, every clause my father ignored.
The company's accounts, the fake holdings, the missing funds, it all reached the right hands quietly, efficiently, like truth finally finding its path. I didn't gloat. I didn't even feel relief, just calm, the kind that comes after you stop trying to be understood. That afternoon, the mill shut down for auditing. Trucks parked in silence. Workers stood outside, smoking, waiting for someone to tell them what came next. They deserved answers. They'd given their lives to that place. I walked among them, shaking hands, listening. One man said, "Didn't think you'd come back here, Mr. Bennett." "I didn't think I would either," I said, "but this place deserves better than what it became." He nodded. "Your granddad would have been proud." Later that week, I got a call from my mother. Her voice was soft, slower than usual. "Your father's been quiet," she said. "He knows what you did." "I didn't do it to hurt him." "I know," she whispered. "That's why it hurts him more." There was a pause, then, "He wants to see you." I told her I'd think about it, but I already knew the answer. 2 days later, the black sedan appeared again, but this time, my father didn't come out. He just sat there with the window down. I walked over. "You did what you had to," he said. His voice was tired, not angry. "The company will survive. The name will too." "The name doesn't matter if no one can stand behind it," I said. He nodded, eyes on the orchard behind me. "Your grandfather planted those trees with his bare hands. You remember that?" "I do." He used to say, "Legacy isn't about who gets the money. It's about who keeps showing up when the work gets hard." For the first time in years, I heard truth in his voice. "I was wrong about you," he said. "You were meant to lead this family, just not the way I thought." He drove away without another word. I watched until the car disappeared down the road, the dust hanging in the air like memory. Weeks passed. The investigations ended quietly. Richard left town. The company survived under new management, smaller but honest. People stopped whispering when I walked by. One Saturday, Emily and I went to the orchard together. The blossoms were just beginning to open, white and pale pink against the dark branches. She carried a basket and hummed some tune she'd learned at school. "Dad, are we part of the family again?" I looked at her, at the sunlight on her hair, the smile that hadn't learned what bitterness was. "We never stopped being, sweetheart. We just remembered who we are." She nodded, satisfied, and went back to picking blossoms off the ground, holding them like treasures. The wind picked up, carrying the faint echo of church bells from town. I turned toward the old wooden sign at the edge of the property, the one I'd restored myself, sanding each letter until it felt like truth under my hands. Bennett and daughter, established 1948. For a long time, I just stood there, listening to the bells fade and the orchard breathe. They took the inheritance, but I kept the legacy.